Okay, so this is just basically after you have your weaving set up, the weaving board is already set up. Now you're going to choose 1 arm's length of yarn, so measure from your shoulder to your fingertips, cut the yarn, get a needle. The end opening of the needle is called the eye of the needle. You're going to thread the eye of the needle by pushing your yarn through, pulling it, and then tying a square knot. So all I'm going to do is make a loop, pull through, tie once, and I'm not pulling too tight, so make a second loop, pull twice so that my knot doesn't come undone in the middle of weaving. Then to start on my board, the starting point is where your last ending tooth is, the only one that you have on the bottom. And I'm going to start with just basic tabby weaving. So over, under with the needle. This is no different than what was done in 5th grade, so basic tabby weaving. And I weave a few lines, then I pull, and I'm going to leave a tail. So again, over, under. The difference between weaving this type of board and the weaving board in 5th grade is that now that I'm at the end of my board, I have to pay attention to how I ended the board. So I ended over the last warp string. So instead of turning the needle to come back this direction, which is what I would have done in 5th grade, I'm going to turn the board instead. So I ended over on the front side of the board, so this time I'm going to end or start by going under. So instead of turning the needle is still going always in the same direction. The only thing that I turned was the board itself. And I just keep turning the board over and over again every time I get to the ending. So over, under, and pay attention to how you end on one side, because when you flip the board, you always have to alternate. So I ended under, I'm going to flip the board again. Now I would be starting over. So it should be opposite of the string before. Okay, so that's the basic way to weave on the 3D board. All right, so I've got my board ready to go. Now we're going to try some different types of weaving stitches. We already know how to do the tabby. Now we're going to learn how to do the Egyptian knot. So I have the yarn threaded through the eye of the needle, same way as I did with the tabby. And I'm going to start by going under the first string, and I'm going to pull my yarn close to the end, just leaving a little tail there. And then I'm going to go right back under that same string that I just went through before. So notice how I'm making a loop around the warp string. So I just did a loop around that first string. So to see that again, under the next string, and then I'm going to go back under again. And it creates a loop. And the Egyptian knot is the stretchy weaving stitch. So this is the one that you want to do if you plan to have your bag function to hold multiple items or a bigger item, and you want it to stretch out. Okay, so under, 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 under is the rotation for each individual string with the Egyptian knot. All right, so the second pattern listed on your sheet is called the shag. The shag is more of a pattern that you do for like a decorative edge on the bottom, maybe the middle, or the top of your bag, and that would probably be about 2 to 3 rows. But it's not something you'd use for like the whole part of the whole body of your bag. So the first thing you would do is pre-cut strings to about the length of your board, and I usually cut about 10 to begin with. I'm not going to do any kind of threading through the eye of the needle at all, but I will use the needle. So the first thing I'm going to do with the shag is put one string under two of my warp strings, like so. Then I'm going to use the needle, and all I use the needle for is to kind of pull a loop so that I have an opening there. Then I'm going to take the two ends and I'm going to put them through that opening and pull. Sorry about the bell. Then the next two strings that I would use would be the next two available. So I'm not going to overlap and share the same line as the first one. Same thing, even them out. So put it under the next two strings, even it out. So it's about the middle, pull a loop, find that end, those two ends, and put the ends through the hole. And pull. Okay. Now, as you do this, you don't want to pull them so tight right away that your strings are pulling together like that, because it'll leave a big gap in between your strings. So you want them to be a little bit loose to begin with, and then when you would end up going all the way around and starting a second line, the next line would actually use the middle two, so it would actually share these two and these two across, so it actually close up the gap. So that's the shag. All right, so the final pattern on your list is called the skip. Very similar to the tabby, so a lot of it's going to be familiar to you. So I'm going to start by threading the needle through the eye, tying the knot around it again so that it holds in place. And I'm going to start on the side again, the beginning side, and I'm going to start by going under two, then over two, then under two, then over two, all the way through. Then I'm going to pull until I leave a short tail, okay? And then I'm going to continue. So I went under those two, so I'm going to go over the next two, under two, over two, under two, and I'm going to end the front side by going over the last two strings. So when I flip the board, in order to continue, I'm going to go under these two and then continue like so. Now on the back side, because we have 21 strings on the back side of the board and we have 20 on the front side ended up even. The back side is going to end up uneven. So I will end up going under only one on the edge, and I always have to keep the same rotation, under two, over two, under two, over two. So if I end going on under only one, then when I flip the board the next time, I have to continue with that same cycle. So I'm going to go under one more and then start by going over two, under two again. So it's going to be a little bit different on the front side than the first line was. And you really do not see the skips start to form until you have about 3 lines done. When you have approximately 3 lines done, then all of a sudden you can start to see the diagonal lines forming. So at this point, it's still not really going to show, but I ended under one. So again, I would flip the board and start by going under one more, and then continue with the over two, under two, over two, under two. And you can kind of see a little bit of a diagonal forming. And as I get to the end, I'm going to flip, and here's line 3, and I ended under 2, so I'm going to go over the first 2. So I'm just going to stop here so you can kind of see the rotation. So I should have a diagonal forming. So it's going up on a slant. If I separate these, you can see it a little bit better. So it's going up on a slant. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And as I continue, it'll be more pronounced, that diagonal line. Okay, so that's the skip. All right, the last thing that you're going to need to know how to do is what happens when I run out of yarn. So I'm going to take apart the knot or cut it off from the needle, and it doesn't matter where you end. It could be in the middle of the board, the edge, the starting point, doesn't matter. And I'm going to tie a square knot by looping the two together once, and a square knot would be a second time, so 2 times, just like tying your needle together or tying the yarn to the needle. And then I might not want these quite so long, so I can trim them a little bit. I wouldn't trim them too close to the knot, not like right up to the knot, not until we get the whole weaving done and off the board. And then the fresh end, the other opposite end, I would tie to the eye of the needle again and continue going, just like that. All right, at the end of each class period, no matter where I am with my weaving, all I'm going to do is wrap around any extra and tuck in my needle underneath so it's all in place and it's easy to store. If I have the shag and I have loose strings already cut, I'm just going to push those underneath like that just to hold them in place so I don't lose them and put it in storage.